You've bought more books than you'll ever read. You know this. You've made peace with it, mostly, except for the occasional flash of guilt when you catalogue the stack by your bed, the shelf in the hallway, the boxes in the closet you haven't fully unpacked since the move. People have called it excessive. You've quietly wondered if they're right, if the unread ones are proof you're all intention and no follow-through. But there's a specific psychology behind why some people keep filling their homes with books, read and unread alike. And it isn't about failing to finish what you started. It's about something most people have never had named for them. If you're a person whose home has slowly filled with books, read, half-read and entirely unread, and you've quietly wondered what the growing collection says about you, the psychology underneath isn't what the guilt has been telling you. It isn't procrastination. It isn't failure to finish. It's a specific and well-documented relationship between a person and the physical record of their own mind. And once you see what the shelf is actually doing, both the collecting and the unread stack start to look very different. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Almost everything else in a home is either purely functional or purely decorative. A couch is for sitting, a lamp is for light, but a book is both an object and a document. It takes up physical space on a shelf the way any object does, and it also contains a specific, dated record of what its owner was curious about or trying to understand at the moment they acquired it. No other common household object does both of these things at once. A book is furniture that remembers. This is why a shelf of books feels different to stand in front of than a shelf of anything else. You aren't just looking at objects. You're looking at a physical timeline of a person's inner life. What they were reading during the hard year, what they picked up right after the breakup, what they bought with excitement and never opened because life moved on. The books don't need to be read to do this work. Their presence alone is already a record. Essayist and risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb, in his book The Black Swan, coined the term Antilibrary to describe exactly this phenomenon, a personal library where the unread books outnumber the read ones, and where that imbalance is not a failure but the entire point. Taleb argued that a home library's value lies less in what has already been read, and more in what remains possible to learn. The unread books function as a visible, daily reminder of how much the person still doesn't know, which keeps curiosity active rather than closing it off. A shelf with more unread books than read ones is a shelf that still believes it has room to grow. Psychologist Sam Gosling's research on possessions and identity, which has already documented how living spaces reveal accurate psychological information about the people inside them, applies with unusual precision to books specifically. Unlike most possessions, which reveal taste or resources, a personal library reveals the specific shape of a mind over time. Not just what the person likes, but what they have spent private hours thinking about. Picture this. A guest at your home picks a book off the shelf without asking, the way people do, casually, mid-conversation, and flips it open. Inside, in your own handwriting, is a note in the margin from 8 years ago. A thought you had, in response to a paragraph, that you don't fully remember having. For a moment, your guest is reading a specific private version of you that doesn't fully exist anymore. That margin note wasn't written for anyone to find. It was a private exchange between you and the book in a moment that has since passed. But the shelf kept it, the way nothing else in your home keeps anything. The couch doesn't remember who you were when you bought it. The book does. Every book on that shelf is quietly doing the same thing, whether or not anyone ever opens it and finds the proof. But here's where it gets interesting. The specific ratio of read to unread books on a shelf tells its own story. And it isn't the story of failure the guilt suggests. A person whose shelf is entirely read books has stopped reaching. A person whose shelf includes a large unread stack is still actively curious about more than they've had time to explore. The unread books are a map of where their mind still wants to go, not evidence of where it failed to arrive. But there's more going on than curiosity. Books, more than almost any other object, get acquired at specific emotional inflection points. The book bought right after a hard diagnosis, the one picked up during a specific relationship, the one that showed up the week a parent died. Years later, the spine on the shelf carries that entire context invisibly, even if the cover gives nothing away to anyone else. And here's the kicker. The cultural framing of a book-filled home has drifted in recent years toward performance. The styled shelf, the colour-coordinated spines, the aesthetic library assembled for how it photographs rather than what it contains. That version exists, and it's a different behaviour entirely. But for most people whose homes have genuinely filled with books over years, the shelf was never built to be seen. It was built the way a mind gets built, one curiosity at a time, mostly in private with no audience in mind at all. Now, let's be honest. Two things at once. First, not every book-filled home is doing the psychological work this video describes. There's a real, different phenomenon of buying books by the yard or by cover colour, purely for how a shelf photographs, and the books inside are sometimes never opened at all. That's a legitimate aesthetic choice, but it isn't what this video is about. Second, an unread stack that produces active guilt rather than active curiosity is worth noticing. The Antilibrary reframe works when the unread books still feel like possibility. If they've started to feel like judgment, that's a different relationship with the shelf. But for the person watching this and recognizing your own shelf in it, the one that's grown slowly for years, read and unread mixed together, some spines cracked and some still stiff. Here's what's happening. You haven't failed to keep up with your own ambitions. You've built a visible, physical record of a mind that has stayed curious for years, and the unread books aren't debt. They're proof the curiosity never ran out. The work isn't to feel guilty about the stack. It's to see the shelf for what it actually is, not a to-do list, but a long, ongoing, mostly private conversation between you and everything you've ever wanted to understand. There's something quietly moving about a home that has slowly filled with books over years, without anyone planning it that way. Nobody sat down and decided to build a shelf that would eventually hold a record of who they'd been at every stage along the way. It just happened, one curiosity at a time, until the shelf became something closer to a diary than a decoration. Private, dated, and more honest about the person than almost anything else in the house. If you've spent years quietly collecting more than you'll ever finish, this might be the moment to consider that the unread ones were never the failure. They were the part of you that refused to stop wanting to know more, kept visible on a shelf, waiting. You haven't failed to keep up with your own reading. You've built a physical, visible record of a mind that has stayed curious for years, and the unread books on your shelf are proof the curiosity is still active, not evidence that it ran out. If you're the person whose home has slowly filled with books, read and unread, and who has quietly felt a flicker of guilt every time you looked at the stack, I want you to hear this. The shelf was never a to-do list. It was always a record of a mind that kept reaching, and that reaching is the thing worth being proud of, not embarrassed about. If any part of this landed for you, I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments about a specific book on your shelf you haven't read yet, but still can't imagine giving away, or one you opened years later and found a version of yourself inside it you'd forgotten. If you want more videos that name what's actually happening in the patterns most people never have the language for, that's what this channel is for. Hit subscribe. See you in the next.